NHL insider Frank Seravalli of Daily Faceoff, the Frankly Speaking podcast, and we've talked. Week has gone by, nothing's happened on the trade market.
3 weeks and nothing. Wait a second.
Wow.
That is so disrespectful to Alex Nylander. I forgot he was still in the
enough.
league.
Fair enough.
Still he was on
In fact,
contract, but yes.
He's not in the league. He's in the HL, but that's right.
So it's been 3 full weeks without an NHL bona fide trade.
Right. And you were telling me the feedback you're getting from GMs is that they just hate this market right now. What do they hate about it?
Well, it's thin. And there's a couple really nice defensive pieces available in Noah Hanifin and Chris Tanev. There's a couple nice forward pieces available in Jake Gensel and maybe Adam Henrique, if that's your flavor. But outside of that, we're really not looking at a whole host of difference makers. And that's what teams are looking for at this time of year, to pony up big assets. So when the market's that thin, this is why we sit here and wait. Everyone that I talk to, they're groaning. They're like, "Ugh, this trade market." But you can't invent one. And I think it speaks to also really the change, the huge change we've seen in the NHL of so few guys make it to free agency. So few guys make it to the last years of their deals. If you have an impact player, teams are locking them up.
So who do you think blinks first here, the sellers or the buyers?
My guess is a couple buyers blink first, specifically when it comes to Tanev. Like, I think the Flames are holding out to try and get the best price possible. But at some point, someone's going to say, you know what? Let me just get the guy that I actually want, take him off your hands, and we can end this. And that way I make sure I get the piece. Because whether it's Dallas or whether it's probably not going to be Toronto because they don't have the second round pick. But, there's a few teams that have been in the mix for Tanev that, they're certainly interested, but no one is willing to take that one next step further. So on that file specifically, I'd imagine a buyer.
And I guess it's even more complicated when you got a guy like Noah Hanifin, whom, as you reported, would have an interest in signing with the Tampa Bay Lightning, but Tampa just doesn't have any kind of assets to trade for him. So it probably means that he's a rental somewhere. Is that fair, Frank?
Yeah, I mean, it's looking like a pure rental short of going to Tampa. Now, I don't know if there's a team that's in the mix that's sitting there saying, well, what if we could just bring him here and then try and convince him? Sometimes that does work. And with Hanifin in particular, he's really been kind of wishy-washy when it comes to the Flames. Like, he had said to them, look, this is what I'm looking for. They went out and hit the price, $60 million over 8 years. He couldn't put pen to paper. And so I think he's enjoyed his time in Calgary. I think he's been clear with them since last summer that his preference was to play in the US. And does a US team try and make a play for him at this deadline that then they could hold out hope that they could get him? But everyone seems to think that his preference has been, and it's been mutual, to end up in Tampa when it's all said and done. The question is, will that be on July 1st or will that be before March 8th?
Let me just follow up there. Dave noticed the Calgary AGM was at like 3 or 4 straight Bruins games. Hannifin's a Boston kid. And of course, Boston a couple years ago made the deal for Hampus Lindholm and then re-signed him. Like, is there why wouldn't that work?
Dave Notice lives in New Hampshire.
Right.
New Hampshire is his closest NHL team. So this is the only issue that I have when people start tweeting out seating charts and scouts. Hey, there's some connection here. Look, he's watched them 4 games in a row. It's like, no, I don't know where he lives in New Hampshire, but it's an hour from his house. And that's the only team he gets to see regularly, short of getting on a plane and flying somewhere. So I think you always have to be careful at this time of year when you see people. There are some interesting signs to look for, whether it can't just be a GM showing up in a market because certain guys have different things on their list. And sometimes when you see many scouts from one team, it's because they were holding their amateur meetings there, wherever that location ended up being. Or some scouts that show up, they also just happen to be on their regular schedule. And we joke about this all the time because I mentioned this on my show last week, and a manager texts me. He goes, I have a couple scouts that go to certain places all the time because they like the press meal and they like the parking situation. He's like, go figure. Or they've got a restaurant in town that they like, so they schedule their trips. We give them leeway, and that's how they do it. So it is funny how some of that stuff kind of becomes like, oh man, there must be something here. There's smoke, there's fire, like whatever it might be. And it's like, no, probably not.
The former Vancouver Canucks GM and Burnaby North grad now has a home in New Hampshire.
If I'm not mistaken, did he play college hockey there?
University of Maine. University of Maine.
Okay.
Yeah, so
but
right next door.
But he's lived in New Hampshire a long time, I think. He
was in Anaheim there for a while.
While he worked in Anaheim, he was living in New Hampshire.
Wow.
Don't quote me as gospel. That's what I was told.
No kidding.
But nonetheless, whatever it might be isn't always what it appears.
Right.
Every time I've asked this question, I get the same response. Oh no, nobody would ever do that. But GMs do things that you're not supposed to do all the time. They hold on to UFAs to be and don't get things for them. Will the Vancouver Canucks react to this 4-game losing streak, do you think? I know you're not supposed to because it's only a 4-game swath, but I don't know. This seems like a losing streak that maybe deserves a little bit of reaction if you're the Vancouver Canucks. And even Quinn Hughes sort of made a veiled reference to they'll bring guys in that can do the job if we can't. So I don't know. Do you think there's a temptation here by the Canucks to make a little bit of a change as they waffle here?
I don't think so. And what would you like them to do? I think that's the big thing that I'd come back to is, okay, you've spent some significant assets to this point. You've made tons of changes to your team in the last calendar year. What would be next on your list?
Well, ironically, they're struggling to score right now, and they've already addressed that with Lindholm. If you're going to do anything, it would be Tanev, and that's not actually what's ailing them right now, ironically.
So this kind of comes back to, and I thought, is there any part of this, if I'm not mistaken, the Canucks are 1 game under 500 since acquiring Lindholm. Is that right?
Yep.
Is there anything to what Rick Tocchet said coming out of the All-Star break and what he was trying to preach to these guys of, hey, we've loaded up here, but that doesn't mean you can take your foot off the gas? Is any of this just human nature where you've had a season in which almost everything has gone right for you to this point? Everyone was predicting a regression that didn't really come. So is this either part of the regression, or is this just the Canucks looking at the gap that they have in the Pacific Division standings and subconsciously saying, hey, it's February, we're not at the point yet where we got to be turning it on, even though they haven't earned the right to do so technically, that it's just how it works in an 82-game slog.
Well, outside of last night, the underlying stats are actually getting better in the new year rather than what they did previous. So the regression that, people were talking about isn't actually happening again, save for last night.
Honestly, I think that's what Tocchet outlined last night after the game, Frank. Did you hear that?
I didn't. So I was purely basing it off of what he was saying a few weeks ago coming out of All-Star. Is just, it's in your nature to say, hey, we just got so much better getting Lindholm. We don't have to try as hard now.
You should go back and listen. It was one for the ages.
It's a good one.
From
It's a good one.
Yeah, it really was.
Can you paraphrase? Give me a snippet.
BALLS.
Yeah, lack of.
Do
lack
something.
Thereof.
We got 4 or 5 no-shows. So, he got after him. And
man, that's as hard as he's been since they were in Philly.
Yeah, it really was. It really was.
It really is. It really is. And the other thing, I wonder, his biggest one last year was after a Seattle game. So I do wonder whether he picks his spot and goes, okay, that's the rival. It's the shortest flight home. That's the spot that I'm going to lose it. And they played right into his hands a couple of times down at Climate Pledge Arena. Hey, guys with term, non-rentals, what are you hearing on that market?
So the Scott Laughtons, that group?
Yeah.
Trying to think of the other guys.
Rasmus Anderson, if he's available.
I tend to believe Rasmus Anderson isn't available.
Okay.
The Flames have so many other fish to fry that unless someone is really knocking Craig Conroy's socks off, he's like, yeah, we'll get to that when I have a chance to breathe as Flames general manager for the first time, which hasn't happened yet because his hair's been on fire since last June. But when it comes to Scott Lawton, for instance, like the Flyers are open for business, but they've set a high price because they see what Sean Monahan went for, and they say, well, he's a rental with injury history, even though he's having a productive season to the point that Scott Lawton couldn't touch in his best years, that they think they should be able to get a first round pick. That's what they've set the asking price as, first round pick plus. And teams are interested. They like Scott Lawton. They think he's an interesting piece. They think he's a 200-foot player that can help you win. But the calculus that the teams that I've talked to come back to is, if we've only got limited assets, are we trading a first-round pick for a player who may potentially help our chances to win the Stanley Cup this year by low single digits? And the answer is, I'd rather go out and get a Gensel or go get someone that is of significant impact, potentially offensively.
And I hear you there, Frank, but should not a lot of these teams have those positions set? Should they not feel good about who is driving the bus from an offensive point of view and from a top four defense point of view?
So,
I understand.
A great example would be the
difference.
Oilers, right?
Yeah.
Like the Oilers have a pretty potent top six, yet they're looking for another top six winger.
Are injuries changing the market right now? Injuries are every time I look at Twitter, people are going down, and so-and-so's to the room. He's not going to return. Matthew Tkachuk the other day. I mean,
Mark Stone.
Yeah, Mark Stone. Yeah, and people are rolling their eyes a little bit at Vegas. Is Vegas pulling a Tampa Bay Lightning here, or is this just the way things have unfurled for them?
Well, people would argue that they pulled the Tampa Bay Lightning last year when all of a sudden in the last week of the regular season, a guy who hasn't been seen since January strolls out of the locker room for practice like nothing ever happened, and then just steps right back in as a horse for the Golden Knights in their run to their first Stanley Cup in franchise history. I get it. This time around with Stone, I reported yesterday a lacerated spleen. I don't know the severity of it, but obviously something you have to keep an eye on. Some people have suggested the injury timeline is anywhere between 3 to 6 months. We've seen other players come back more quickly than that. The point being here that if the Golden Knights feel like they have the ability to keep Mark Stone on the shelf into the playoffs, that they're going to use every dollar, every red cent that they have available to them on their cap, the $9.5 million, to improve this team if they can. They think that they're right in that window to win once they get Shea Theodore and Jack Eichel back and Stone back to really be that team that, with the way Aiden Hill has been playing, can go do it. So expect them to be as aggressive as they've ever been if they feel like they have that ability with Stone to use that money.
Incidentally, I looked up the spleen injuries that we've seen in the NHL, and the two examples I came up with were both in May. So they were playoffs. So Sean Avery was gone for the rest of the playoffs, but was back for training camp. Peter Forsberg was gone with a ruptured spleen. So how different that is from lacerated, I don't know, but he was done for the year. Remember, he didn't come back till the following playoffs. So
it can be really serious.
Yeah.
And it can actually be, if it is, the spleen apparently bleeds more than any internal organ because it filters blood, that it can actually be life-threatening.
Yeah.
So I'd expect them to be pretty careful. And it probably lends itself to a lot of people asking questions about cap shenanigans. And the true answer is probably no one really knows for sure. What does a healthy spleen look like? Dr. Seravalli asks.
Yeah, Dr. Seravalli joining us here on Sekeres and Price. There's a report out there that the Canucks offered Pettersson $96 million over 8 years, so 12 per year.
At the start of the year,
Yeah, at the start of the year. What do you know about that?
I don't know anything. I had not heard and or seen that report. I'd be surprised if they went to 12 before the season started. I was told they were more in the 11s, but I certainly wouldn't know enough to, say that the report is not credible. I think it's clearly a number now that starts with a 12. But my question is the term. What does the player want? And we never have gotten an answer yet as to exactly what he's thinking.
When you call around and talk to people in the league, what do they say about this Pettersson situation in Vancouver?
They think it's slightly odd. They think it's a little bit unusual that you have a team that's willing to step up and write the check, and the player is more or less rebuffing them right now. And it's not even necessarily in saying no, it's just continually putting it off.
Mm-hmm.
That part, I think they're like, that's interesting. Why is that the case? And I don't know the answer.
Right. All right. Well, we hope to have trades to talk about with you next Friday. High time. I mean, we're 2 weeks today.
Yeah,
Frank.
this is officially the ramp up now.
Yeah.
You'd think there'd be some movement, but we'll see.
3 weeks to the day since the last trade. Sean Monahan, February 2nd. Like, come on, give me some action here.
Absolutely.
Dying.
Frank Seravalli is off there studying for a medical degree in all the downtime that he has between non-trades around the league. Like, he's going to tell you what's going on with the spleen.
At this point, he might operate on Mark Stone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So do you guys do know that Robin Leonard called me Dr. Seravalli in a press conference?
Oh, did he really?
A couple years ago.
Oh, I did not.
And it was
know that.
in Vegas. That I almost tweeted yesterday when I had the spleen injury. I almost tweeted at the end, like, from Dr. Seravalli. But I figured, you know what, like, no need to.
Did you go to the same med school as Dr. Recchi?
I did not.
Yeah.
But I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night.
I'm sure you did.
Yeah.
For the points. Thank you for this. Until next Friday.
See you guys.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.